So to do that, again, I just duplicate out my geometry. And you just got to figure out, well, what size is the iris going to be? How cartoony or realistic do you want it to be? So let me just grab a row of faces here. And that's probably even too big, right? So somewhere in the middle, perhaps. So I'm going to use my poly tools. Maybe just add in a row. Something around there. Now I'm thinking that's too small. Here, it's going to be a Goldilocks situation. Let me do it one more time here. Somewhere around here, maybe. Okay, you know what? Actually, this is the one I'm going to duplicate out. So let me just duplicate this again. All right, let me just label these. So this will be lens. This will be iris layer. And now, there's more to it than the iris, but it's the iris layer. And I'm just going to isolate that. And I'm going to grab those faces. And I'm going to scale them down a bit. Now, I guess that's about it. I feel like I wanted to go one more, but anyhow. I'm just going to flatten this up a bit, just like this, by scaling it down and moving it in. Something along those lines like that. The pupil, if you need to dilate a pupil, it's really easy. It's just animating, putting a cluster on that geometry. It's going to be extruded in. Oops, yeah, I thought I grabbed something there. Let me see. Extruding it in. And again, it's just, we don't have to have a physical hole. It'll just be occluded and it'll be in shadow. So, it's up to you if you want to go any further than that, but that's probably good enough. It'll just be in shadow anyway. And you'll notice I extruded it twice, just so that when it smooths out, it does round it out a little bit. All right, so we have a shape like this, so you can kind of clearly see it's a little bit flatter. And then what we're going to do is bring up the lens. Oops, bring up the lens. Here it is here. And I'm going to grab the same faces, but instead of pushing it flat, I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit more like this. And it's this shape that's going to allow for the glints to form over the pupil and over that area and get proper reflection. So if we're looking at Nosferatu, it's that shape that gets those highlights in the right places and all that. Because if it's just a perfect sphere, it would just be like an insect eye where it just kind of gets spread out over the entire surface. And then you just have to decide on how you're going to texture it. Now, if I'm in a hurry, I just cheat and use procedural textures, which look okay from a distance, not so hot up close. So I would do something like this. Well, let's save first. Save scene as. We'll call it I, just in case it crashes. Rigs, Linus. Sure, I'll just save it there. And let me do an IPR. All right, so we got our eye shape. So I need two Redshift shaders. One is going to be on the lens. We'll have to have refractions, just so that it's the refraction that it'll make it feel flat, even though as the eye turns, you'll get proper distortion, lens distortion, underneath that. So we do need to have a refracted surface. So let's do that. So I'm going to go into Assign New Material, and we're going to use a Redshift Material. And again, we want to turn on refractions. On the lens, we don't want it casting shadows, so we're going to have to turn that off. That's not quite what we're seeing here, though. What we're seeing here is actually the two pieces of geometry directly on top of one another. So you are going to have to scale the lens geometry up slightly. Now the pivot should be in the exact same spot, so it should scale equally away. So just a small smidgen, just so that there is a clear division between the two surfaces. Shadow casting should be okay, I guess. It doesn't look like it's casting shadows. I guess the beauty of the Redshift renderer. So the IOR, so the refractive index, you could just leave it connected. I think I usually break it though. So I'll go and break the connection. So link to reflection, turn that off. And then I'll control it separately and through here. So this just controls how much refraction is going to happen on the eyeball itself. So it's a matter of just kind of getting it looking with the right amount of reflection there. Something maybe like that might be okay. Refraction, sorry, the right amount of refraction. So the higher that is, the more kind of close to the surface the underlying geometry is going to be. So that's way too much. 1 is way too little. So somewhere in between. Yeah, we'll go with that. And then it's just a matter of texturing the eyeball part. So I'm going to add a Redshift material to that as well. And then on that Redshift material, we're going to go into the diffuse. I'm going to start by adding in a ramp. So again, this is just procedural. We could go in and do the UVs, take it into, say, Substance or ZBrush and model in all the little rods and cones. That's this part of the eye, part of the iris. Right, looks like the surface of a planet. So we have all these little tiny rods and cones that catch the light. Usually what I'll do is I'll just do a grayscale gradient of this and use that as a bump map. So it does actually catch those little bits, but that's only if I need to do something a little bit more that's going to be scrutinized up close. We can kind of get something similar using these procedural textures. So again, starting off with a 2D texture as a ramp. So where are you? Ramp, there you are. Now with the ramp, it's just this kind of grayscale. It goes from black to white. So I just want to make sure that this is going to go into the pupil area so that even though it is going to be kind of an occluded darkness, you know, it's a good idea to throw in a darker color in there just to be on the safe side to make sure that it does go pure black. And then with ramps, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with these. Basically, we can just keep adding additional values to this. We can also change color and stuff like that through here as well. So let me just get this one aligned with where my iris starts, somewhere around there. Usually I'll also go with a slightly darker color around the edge where the iris meets the white part of the eye. I'll go with Scalia, but off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I think it's the Scalia. Anybody an optician or have it? I think that's the white part, the Scalia. I could just do this. Let me just go back to my illustration. I think it had it all labeled here. Sclera, Scalia. I'm thinking of a Supreme Court justice maybe, but sclera. All right, and then this solid area, you know, if it's cartoony, sure, you can maybe get away with that. But typically what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll put in a procedural noise in there that will imitate the rods and cone texture that we saw. And then we could even take that and put it into a bump channel as well to create a little additional highlights and shadowy bits if you go up close to it. So I'll grab the color. And then in that color, so we can feed any kind of texture in any one of these little elements. So I'm going to grab a noise. Let me see. Oh, this is new. Simplex noise. What does that do? I usually just go fractal noise. All right, so fractal. And you get something that looks like that. But you also have a placement node. So on the placement node, we can kind of stretch things out and multiply the number of times it's seen. So if I maybe reduce this in one of the axes, oh, it's starting to look a little bit better. and then maybe we can repeat it a few more times in another axis. Now, from a distance, you know, that's probably good enough, but let me see here if we can, maybe 1.3. I'll go with that. That's getting pretty close. And then we can color it here as well. So under the color balance, this is where I can start adding in my color. So I don't know what color eyes, brown, or I was using kind of a orangey color before. I'll stick with orange. And then for the dark color, it doesn't have to be black. We can also throw in maybe a color in there as well. Maybe something like that. That's looking kind of good. And depending on how lazy I am or not, I'll just end here. Or what I'll do is I'll duplicate that fractal and I'll put it into, which I'll might as well just do it. So I'll duplicate this fractal. So let's open up that network. So we got this fractal here. I would just duplicate that. So edit, duplicate shading network. There it is. And then I would put it into, it doesn't take long. I should just do this all the time, but I would just put it into another section of my ramp, just a little bit closer to the black. And then just skew the colors a little bit so it has a slight color transition across that. So let me just drag and drop that there. So that's a little bit close to that ramp. But anyhow, let's change the colors first, and then I'll worry about that after. So I might go a little bit darker perhaps. Is it gonna work? There we are. Yeah, it's working. So I don't know, maybe I'll change it to a completely different color just so we can see it happening. Well, that's kind of nice, a bit of a gray tinge around there. That looks cool. And then what we can do is take this. This is looking maybe just a little bit faint, perhaps. I might want to tighten that up. So that's just a matter of tweaking the ramp. So if we bring these elements a little bit closer together, it'll start tight. Now that's going to be too much, maybe. Maybe it's okay. I just need to fade that out a bit more. Maybe darken it. I don't know. Something. I need to do something. I'll go a little bit darker. All right. Let's say that's good. And then what we can do, this is where you want to maybe do some substance or ZBrush, because typically there's going to be some veins and discoloration. It's not going to be pure white. It's going to go into a little bit more of a slight pinkish color, closer to where the eyelids are, and you'll definitely have the odd vein and stuff like that kind of popping in. So you can kind of cheat it a little bit, which is what I did with the Dracula, and just had to go just a little bit slightly pinkish near the edge. That's okay. That's not bad. And then what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this network and then just use the grayscale values for bump. But you know what? Just for argument's sake, let's just take the entire thing and throw it into the bump channel and see what happens when we do that. Probably nothing good, because I really just want this area. Let's just do it right. Let's do it the right way. So what I'm going to do is go back into here. So this is my color. I'm going to duplicate this. So edit, duplicate, shading network. There it is there. And then this one will be my bump. Now for the bump, I really just want the iris part of the ramp. So let me go into the ramp, and I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to make sure that this is black. This is black. And then these pieces here that are going to be the rods and cones, I'm just going to make those grayscale, black and white. So there's two of them. So let me just make sure I'm doing it the same for both. Something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ramp, and actually I really just needed to duplicate that part out. I didn't really need this material here. But I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it into the bump section. So out color into bump input. it's not really giving me the effect on what. Let's see, is there a bump node? Did that get generated? I don't think so. Let me do this. Bump 2D. And let's do this again. I'm going to take that and put it into my bump value. Bump value, there we are. And then I'm going to take this and put it into my bump map. There we go. This way I can increase, okay, there we go, something's happening. So that way I can increase or decrease the amount. So we have this bump depth. So I can either increase that, which is way too much, or I can decrease it. So I just want something where there's going to be just a little bit of light and shadow play happening. Something like that, maybe. Another thing you could do too is maybe turn on some subsurface scattering onto the eyeball. And basically that's it in a nutshell. You know, you're better off though hand painting that stuff. But you know, this is a very quick way to do it, and you can just have your shader that you can just use over and over again. No, I don't know why. There we go. Let's see if I can get some nicer lighting on that. Now I do have the two materials. I might want to throw a little bit less of a specular on the underlying material. And I don't think this is the nicest background to illustrate this, but sorry, too many eyes. The eyes have it? I don't know. So that's cool. Yeah, so but yeah, definitely maybe some subsurface would be useful. Let's just try that out very quickly, and then I'll start floating around again. So on the iris, and we looked at subsurface the other day. All right, that's looking a little bit better already. And that white is probably way too white, but cool. Starting to look pretty good. And as a quick solution, I mean, beyond the texturing, the geometry would be the same for my approach to this. It's very similar to how other people approach it, although I've seen different methods. But again, going a little bit more anatomical will probably be better in the long run. And it is something you just create an eye, you can probably just reuse it in all your projects once you have one eye texture. Just tweak the colors a little bit. And, if you're to animate the pupil, it's an easy thing too. Just, I know that came up in conversation once with either you or the other group. So it's just a matter of going into the iris. Grabbing the verts around the pupil. So these guys, whoop, if I can I get them? All right, let me just grab that. Just grabbing that row of verts, or that edge. And let me just convert that into vertices. There we go. Now, do we need this guy? Let me go grab these two, both these rows. So yeah, so let me just grab that face. Okay. And then you just throw a cluster on that. A cluster is a deformer. That's a great way of deforming vertices. So deform, cluster. So now we got this guy. We can set that up on a slider. And basically, the slider we can, you know, I think he had a little bit too many, some kind of That's a big pupil. Maybe it's a barn owl. I don't know. Or you can dial it down. And again, it's something that you can just control with a slider or an attribute, custom attribute that you want. And the cool thing with the procedural texture over a regular texture is that it's like a vector graphic. So there's no resolution issues. You can keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in because it's fractalized. So it just has infinite depth. All right. So did that help out with that? Yeah. I think I recorded it. Let me just pause the recording. I hope so, because I did way more than I usually do with that type of thing. So let me just. Let's say I wanted to change the kind of grain because I'm finding maybe there's just too much of this. You can feed both the bump and the color. All your iterations you can control just with one of these projection nodes. Right now, each one has its own projection node. So it's just a matter of just kind of plugging it into each one, which is unfortunately a slightly time-consuming thing, but basically all you're doing is you're connecting the out UV to UV coordinates. Whoops, why did I do that? And the out UV filter size to the filter size. Now that doesn't quite sound right. I feel like we're missing a step there, but yeah, maybe that's right. So I can just kind of swap these out. So I could just use one of these. There we go. And I can just do that for all these ones here as well. So let me just do this. And then do this. And I can get rid of these old ones that I'm not using. So now if I need to change the look of this, I can just do it on the one placement node, and it'll affect all the different color and all of the different bump maps I have going on at the same time. So again, that's just done in through here. So let me go point 1. No, that's too much now. Maybe it needs to be more, like 0.7 or 0.6. Oh, that's looking better. 0.6. Let's go 0.9. That looks kind of cool. No, that's too not enough. Let's go 2. All right, that's looking kind of neat. All right, so I can just kind of change them all at the same time. Now, unfortunately, though, because I have all these different fractal nodes, if I wanted to do anything else beyond that, let's say I wanted to change, say, the frequency and all that, I'd have to redo those, reduplicate, or oh, okay, yeah, we could do this. This is cool. So let's say I want to change the frequency or change a bunch of things, maybe threshold or the amplitude, perhaps. Maybe frequency ratio. Let's see. I'm not really seeing the effects of any of this, but bias. That looks better with the bias up like that. Oh, that's way better. So what I can do, if I want that to go into every single one of those fractals, I can create a preset for this. So I could just call it I. Preset, maybe. Preset. Save it as an attribute. So instead of having to copy or replace any of these, I could just go into them and then swap out the preset. So I can either give it a percentage of my new preset or just replace it entirely. And then I can do that for each of these other ones as well. Now, unfortunately, I lost my color by doing that, but that's okay. Let me just replace it first. Whoa, look at that. That's crazy. That's not what I want at all. I'm going to keep this one for that. So that's cool. And let me just go back in here and do this. I think I added a bit of green to it. There we go. That's looking good. Cool. All right, that looks kind of neat. And then I would also maybe consider turning down the reflection or the refractivity of the inner layers, so only the outer lens is what's reflective. Cool. Looks like a plastic marble. But definitely going in with substance, and then maybe adding a little bit of a slight natural kind of eye-like bump, especially outer more towards that pink side, would definitely help break it up a bit. But once you get that in a head, then it'll look like an eyeball. Or Nick Fury's fake eyeball, at least. All right.